I'd like to thank all of you for coming this morning. This is the student panel that is always convened subsequent to the lecture of the autobiographical lecturer who's been honored for 2013, and in this case it's Dr. Enid Zimmerman, Professor Emerita from the Indiana University. And we have with us our department chair, Peg Feynman, Enid's spouse, Gilbert Clark, and we have students, Michael Ann Higgins, Doris Ray, Elizabeth Harold, and Abby Walton. Do we need to do that again and cut that out?
No, it's all right.
Okay. We'll cut that part out.
Yeah.
And I'm Julie Lindsay. The students attended the lecture last night and have some questions and some observations that they would like additional reflection from Dr. Zimmerman, and we're going to have our own reflections should we have the opportunity. But the focus here and the intent of John Michael was to have an interaction between students and the lecturer, so because he was always very student-centered. And so with that in mind, I would like to turn it over to the students and to see who would like to ask the first question. Thank you, Doris.
First, I wanted to start off by saying thank you to Dr. Lindsay because I know at the end of one of your classes we put together a binder, and I was able to go back to that and reference some of the articles that we read from you, actually. So, my question for you today is: education is always changing, and with each change comes another way to assess not only the students but the teachers. In our educational classes at Miami, we consistently hear the words validity and reliability as a way to show educational growth in the classroom. So in your article, Reconceptualizing the Role of Creativity in Art Education, you state that conceptual and operational definitions of creativity need to be reconsidered to help discover art students who may not be identified as having high creativity abilities through current procedures. So could you expand more?
Okay, well, yeah, I mentioned, yeah, that's a good question. I mentioned yesterday about creativity not being popular, and it fell out of, if you read the literature, you see that there's a huge expanse of time, especially from the 80s through the early part of the century when people were in the 21st century, when people were not speaking about creativity. And then now, because there were the conception that creativity was soft, that what creativity was is everybody doing their own thing without any kind of boundaries or guidelines or means of assessment. And there are creativity tests. There are ways of assessing creativity that are much more what we call authentic assessment, so that we can look at what a student's whole body of work, the kind of way they do problem finding, problem solving, the way they use their own experiences, and also always the skills that are involved when you're doing work. Because if you don't have the skills, both the skills of physically doing something and also the skills of the language and understanding, then you really don't have the whole package. So creativity, for me, means that you needed to develop both those things, both the skills and then the creative problem solving. And without the skills, you may have it in your mind, but you can't produce it. Also, the ability to write about what you do. And that's another, most artists, but not all, can talk about their work, and students need to use that whether they're going to be artists, and they definitely need to be able to write about what they do. But then also students who are not going to be artists but will be hopefully appreciators of art, they also need to be able to express not only they like it, but why they like it. And so I think that we now that we've embraced creativity, my big fear is it's going to go back to, express yourself, here's a bunch of materials, make something, but then we're going to really use those kinds of, that I didn't get into in the lecture, but in the article, you read the article, that we need to look at the kinds of ways people solve set problems. Even finding a problem is important. Then what processes you go to create something. How do you assess whether you've reached a stage where that's finished, and why is it finished? And all those things I think we need to rethink and reconsider. And I wrote a chapter for this handbook about creativity recently. And the one thing I said is we need a theory, and we need assessments, and we need curriculum. So we have creativity for art education. Right now we have creativity of art education, where we take notions about creativity but from other subjects, because we haven't done a lot of research. So even in the book that Flavia Bastos and I wrote, that I spoke about, and in the creativity issues that we wrote, a lot of people are using other theories to create curriculum and do things for art education. I think if we keep doing this, we may eventually come up with what's the best for art education directly, and I think that's where we need to go. So did that help answer your question?
Yes.
It's a good question. Dolores, right? Doris, okay, we said, thank you, Doris. Doris Ray, right? Trying to remember who to say. Okay, does anybody else want to say anything about? No, you people going to respond or?
I 4 minutes, but.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I have expert notes, and I think that's a lot of. I think it's interesting that it's sort of new interest, light that's shining on creativity, innovation. I think innovation is also sort of a hot word.
Right, yes.
And I think business has sort of driven that a lot, rediscovered a lot of that, the value of that, and that's helped to drive that conversation.
And Florida writes about, he writes about the idea that a new generation now of artists we need creative artists. We need people who are creative, because that's driving industry. But I think we also, and I think it's good that it is, that I said in my talk, that we also need to develop each student's creativity. And if you do it working in fine art, and you're doing, working with students who have high ability, I think we have an obligation for them to develop those things. But I think you would agree that skills are so important to do, because that's what I don't want to lose that. But everybody has a right to that, and if people are interested in it for other reasons, that's fine, and economically they are, but we can use that and leverage it so that we can get funds and write grants so all students can profit, not just economically, but it's and what's strange to me is that standardization is taking place with the core subjects at the same time as we're interested in creativity.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And you're going to have to, when you go out and you teach, you're going to have to show you meet the core standards, which is really the lowest common denominator.
Which is easy.
It's easy to do. Everybody's happy, and then you can really expand that. And the way you meet that, and you can, develop students' abilities and their own interests in their community and what's important to them. Because you need to work against standardization, because what happens when students aren't interested and they're alienated, and they go to the art class. If you're in elementary school particularly, we don't want to do this, and nobody's interested. But if you can tie it to integration with other subjects and other things that are going on in the community, and make it a part of a whole, not just your room, you're isolated, and the boundaries are impermeable. But if you're working with others, and we did a lot of work, Kel and I, in different communities, and we even worked on it. Interesting, Indian, they call it Indian, Native American, the Pueblo where we worked. We had an opportunity. That's a whole different way of assessing, having people involved, and there you can. You can't do certain artwork because it goes against their religion and their beliefs. So you have to know that in your own community. Nude, in a college town, nobody thinks really twice if you have an art book and there's a nude in it. But in some of our rural areas where we would do, this is interesting. I don't know if it's true in Ohio, but when you're teaching, there's a lot of students who come from pretty fundamental backgrounds. They can't do anything from their imagination. Teachers, I don't know if any of you are working like that. Teachers get a whole list in rural Indiana where we are of things that they cannot teach to certain children. So you're developing another curriculum. Mm-hmm. And when we had our summer institute, there was one parent who wanted us not to, we went to the art museum, which we did with these highly able kids that I spoke about. We should make sure that they didn't see any nudes. And they didn't want them to walk in front of the fountain. I don't know whether they wanted me to put bras on it, because we have a big fountain, and there are all these kind of mermaid, with their boobs sticking out. And, maybe that shouldn't be on.
I think everybody knows.
It's all right.
And the parents said, we said, look, we can't guarantee that your son won't see these things. We'll try to make sure. So when we went to the museum, we told the kids not to go into this room because there was kind of a show that wasn't appropriate. Some things, with this middle school, early high school. And so who's trying to sneak in? This kid. So if you say you can't have something you want to want. Maybe I should shut up.
The only comment I would have about creativity is it's a way of life and a way we actually live our lives in a very creative way. And I think the last time I heard Howard Gardner speak, he spoke about the ethics of creativity, and he felt that was quite important, because just because you can do it or make it doesn't mean you have to. And so I think that while we embrace creativity, and I certainly do, then there's that important thing. The other thing that he said that I thought was very significant was that anyone who was not working creatively as we entered the 21st century would be replaced by a computer. So that's the kind of value that he put on that. And those two things in particular really stuck with me from that lecture that he did, that I thought were, and I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, that's important. He said in his writings that everybody can lead a creative life, that all of us always have choices, and that we can think outside the box, and always, especially people who have skills in the arts, and can't understand in a culture why people want to negate the arts and not support them the way they do in the United States. Could you imagine the life without arts? Well, we are very fortunate on campus. We have the IU Cinema, one of the 10 best cinemas now on campus in the United States, and they bring in directors, and there's the ballet, there's the opera, there's music we're out almost every night now that we're retired. But even when I was teaching, and this is really interesting, I think you should think about this, you get so caught up in your own kind of mundane, not creative life, by just trying to get by. Some people have families, other people partners, however your life turns out. You're so busy that you often don't have time, you feel like you're in this grind and you're just doing things to keep ahead. So everybody has a religion, and I have a religion too, but I have another religion. My other religion is that once a week, twice a week, no matter what was happening in my life, I went to something outside where I was in the School of Education, to a lecture, to a concert, to a talk that had nothing to do with other things I was studying, to keep my mind alive. And like you heard Howard Gardner, you hear people, you're on a university campus, so few people take advantage of, and that's where creativity comes from. Putting a lot of ideas together from different places and keeping your mind alive and not letting, even doing your artwork, like I still do artwork, but I'm not showing it, but that can be let go, because it often doesn't become a priority. Then when you're teaching, it becomes a grind, even though you love the students and going in. I think you have to keep that part of you going, no matter what. You know, and I did some of the greatest artwork when I was at my first child, and I was doing my MFA, and I did these great kind of paintings, and well, anyway, I think that it's important to do that and not to forget that, because so we each have that capacity, but we often become so overburdened with other things that we don't leave time for outside things to influence us.
So I might ask my question now, just because it's on this topic.
Yes.
No, I don't mean to barge in, but.
No, okay, wait, now, don't ever apologize.
Okay.
You know, I used to have my apologizing stick in my gut, and if someone apologizing, don't apologize.
Yeah.
You know, women often like apologize, right? You know that, and so you're a smart, lovely woman, and so start over and say, I have a question that's really
Okay.
pertinent.
I have a question, and
Good,
it's so
good.
important.
Good.
So it's also about creativity and assessment. So those two things kind of together, and I agree with everything you were saying about creativity and how important it is in students learning through self-direction and initiative. But because of all of the standards and assessments being implemented right now, do you have any sort of suggestions for how to combine the two and have them coexist?
Yes, you've got to give people what they want, so you don't have to argue about it.
Right.
So you have make the rubrics, and you know, you learned, we have to teach that. I did, I'm sure you did, teaching about rubrics and filling in the cells, and you know, and from this to this, and or how many points and all of that. And then you say, you know, we've got to get this done, and then where do you go from there? You know, you've done the project, then you bring them where they can even assess their own artwork, and you follow the standards. Okay, then you look at, I can't use the blackboard, can I?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, I'm
Then
gonna.
there's this one over here, maybe she can.
Do you want me to?
There's a
Can we-
marker right there.
Oh, there, okay.
Should we just bring it over?
This is something that, when you're teaching students skills, and yeah, this is not a good, here, we'll have
Here,
to work.
here's these over here.
We have a 3D part of it.
That
Okay,
one.
so.
And that one. Do you want me to move it over more?
Nope, we got it.
When you want to teach skills, this will work. You want to teach skills, so you know exactly what you're teaching, and you know exactly what your assessment's going to be. Because if you, I don't know, if you're building a pinch pot, say, so you know the different things, they're all going to look alike, these little pinchy things. Okay, then the next step would be to add the pinch pot to other things that you can open it up, you can do different things, you show a lot of different ways of doing it. So you're the teacher here, you know exactly what this is going to be. You know what A, B, and C, and even D, the students have choices. That's where people stop, because you can, this would all be something you can assess, because you as a teacher know what this is going to be. Then when you've gotten to that stage, this is where the stage is, students have developed all this, okay, then you tell the students, what are you going to do? Here's a project. It's going to be something you think about that you learn from all these things. And then you're going to be able to do your own work, whatever, your own research. You're going to write a project, and it's going to be your own, and you're going to decide how you're going to assess it, whatever. So you've met all your standards here. But the creativity is when the teacher brings the students with skills and abilities, and then here's when you say, surprise me. I don't know what it's going to be. I want to know, with all the things you learn, how you are going to put this together in your own way. And it might be, you know, like it might be what kind of problem is it? You're going to find the problem, you're going to shape the problem, you're going to go through the process of doing it, and then you're going to come out with something. And this process as important or more important than the product. This is what you learn. And how you're gonna assess this is pretty open-ended. So you're giving people what they want, but that's not your goal. Your goal is to come here. And you can't do it with every project, but you know, and then the students would keep their notebooks of all their work, and I'd work with this, and then they would have articles and do research and come up with their own product and something that you didn't think of, and that's when you're doing the creativity. so that I don't know. Does that answer your?
Yeah, it does.
Good. Good question. Thank you.
Mine kind of goes along with that.
Good.
I'm just gonna start you off for a little example. So, in terms of creativity, we teach Saturday art, which is just from the kindergarten through high school kids. And he was a first grader who we would give them free time to draw whatever they want. And he would often draw like aliens killing people with laser beams and dead people with blood and all kinds of stuff. And I would be like, maybe this is not like, and I would but then I brought it to my partner who I was with, and she's like, it's not a big deal, like, he just watches video games. So I guess, and then, which reminded me of the parents being concerned about them seeing things, like what is appropriate to when is there a line to be drawn? And last night when you showed that one print or whatever it was, a lot of the times people said, but maybe don't show that.
Right.
Is there a time where you kind of a line to be drawn when they're expressing themselves completely freely in the classroom?
Yes, it has to do with community values. Because what you don't want to do is be, in rural Indiana, a teacher said to a student, don't you put your butt on that chair again, I want you at the door. She was dismissed because she used the word butt in the classroom. I mean, it's an extreme, but you're gonna be in a community where you're teaching. Certain communities, you react in different ways, you know, so a lot of it depends upon what the community values are. Then you have all this violence, and my son, who I've written about, who hasn't, well, I guess he went to University of Pennsylvania, Penn, where he had an undergraduate degree in women's studies as a minor, but he was a fine arts major, and I studied him from when he was a young child through college, and I interviewed him. I've written about it, and he did a lot of these things with it. And the reason I mention this is he was a women's studies minor. He's very, I think, don't you, kind of equitable. Gil has been also quiet, and he kind of supports women as well. Now, the thing was that he drew a lot of these things years ago now. He's in his early 40s. But when he was in middle school and high school, women holding up a woman's head, a man, you know, with blood dripping out, and I said, Eric, how could you have done this? He said, boys' culture. So what you're saying is boys' culture, boys are showing their, you know, then somehow you've got to say, this is, you know, not overreact to it, I think, but say, okay, this is part of, excuse me, this is part of what you know you're doing, but I'm giving this assignment, now I let you do this. You can do it at home, bring it in, show it to me, but we've got another assignment. This is what you need to do in the class. You've done this already, I've seen it, you've gotten out of your system. You can do it at home, keep a notebook, do it there, but we've got this assignment where we're working on, I don't know, going out and photographing the fall and looking at textures, whatever you're doing. And that this is gonna be what I'm expecting you to turn in. I'm interested in what you're doing, I know where it comes from. You can bring it to me, but we're moving on. Now, of course, also, you may not want, kids do manga, and there are all kinds of things that they do on their own. And they often do it in secret, and they don't want to show you, especially kids who are high ability. They often, you don't even know they're in your classes. I encourage them to show you, to share with you. When appropriate, you could have a bulletin board where they put up their work at home. But if it's very bloody and gory, and you'd say, you know, some parents, don't approve of this, and then, but I'm willing to see what you're doing, don't overreact to it, but also don't make let him make a fetish of it, where he or she can't, I mean, it's just as dangerous as girls continuously making models with it, you know, with the way, you know, in wedding gowns and all. I mean, it's also a fantasy, you know, this kind of a life, and there's a lot more they could look at and see and appreciate that's going on. So, but I don't think we should act as condoning or condemning, but we wanna, you know, make sure that they do also other things. I don't know, does anybody else wanna add to that, or?
No.
Does that
And
answer?
do any of you from your experience, can you, do you have anything with any of these questions that you wanna add to that?
I can relate to when you said that they should be working on that project at a certain time, you're like, okay, now we're gonna move on to the next one, because in high school, we student taught the same high school.
Mhm.
And, we had a lot of that, what was this art class, I should be able to make what I want. And, you know, gearing them towards a certain activity to meet those standards that we need, like the core standards that they need to meet for the class. That was a little difficult, you know, when they put me on the spot of, well, why do I have to do this? Why can't I make my own? And then it kinda relates back to the first question when you said that I hope art doesn't turn into that thing where you give them paper, here's all the supplies, you make your own.
But don't condemn what they're doing,
Mhm.
but have them keep a notebook, and show it to me, I'm interested. So, but we have certain things we have to meet in the class too. Once you start, oh, we can't do this, it's horrible, I don't understand, and then you make them wanna do it more. By not, I remember, this may be shocking, I don't care. I remember when I was teaching this is gonna be shocking. When I was teaching in an elementary school in a very economically deprived neighborhood in the Bronx, and where the people who run the motorcycles, what are they called, you know, there's a club of women.
Oh, Harley Davidson?
No, but there's a,
Hell's Angels?
Yeah, Hell's
Angels,
Angels.
yes.
Thank you.
I'm full of surprises.
You can tell by your background.
Abby, Abby, right?
Yes.
That's right. So Hell's, now I forgot what I was talking about. See, I'm talking.
You were in the Bronx.
In the Bronx.
Teaching.
Yes, wait, but I'll get it. And the hell, why were the hell's that? I drove too fast. Well, I'll think about it. Give me 1 second. Oh, I remember. So anyway, so there we were in this school, and they had art exhibits before I came to the school, and it was a K-6 school. And I mean, I looked as young as the 6th graders, and because I was always littler than everyone, even my 6th graders. And I said, I got people to donate all this paper to mount their artwork on. And I was gonna put it around the school on the first floor so everybody could see, and we could have an art show. I did art shows for the parents in the community, came in during my lunch hour, those who were available, but I said to them, look, I'm gonna put this up, but I know in the past when I put it up, people have written shit and fuck and everything on the round, and I said, I don't want it on the artwork. If you wanna do it, I'll have a place in my room where you can write whatever you want, but I don't want to see any writing on. Everybody said it won't work. Nobody ever wrote on any of the artwork, because I said it, these words, and it wasn't going to shock me. It's the same thing, and it extinguished the behavior. So I think you've got to find a place where, but I mean, this is what is on their minds, and it's a very frightening world for young people out there. I mean, with the guns, and there was just another teacher that was shot. You know, and you should say, I know, because I'm scared too. I'm teaching you. Teachers are shot, students are shot. We live in a world, and I know it's disturbing you. You know, and sometimes we need to get away from that and do something that we can think of something in a more positive way. But I'm not, telling you not to do it. So that goes on with I could go on and talk to a lot. Anybody else wanna?
Question?
No, you asked the question, right? Michael did? No, was this yours?
Yeah, I was the start of all.
Is that-
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Well, my question kind of goes with student experiences, but I'm gonna go away from like the United States. So you talked last night about, I mean, you've been in more than 40 countries to do lectures and to work with kids, right? So how when students put their own experience within their artwork, how does it differ from the other countries compared to the United States?
Well, first of all, I know Gil and I have worked mostly in the Far East, in those countries, but we've been in other countries or in South America, I haven't done that much work in Europe, so I'm talking from cultures where I said yesterday, respect for the teacher, and also they have a very, very high level of art training and education for the students. Do you remember when we were in Singapore, we went into this classroom, they were all 6th graders, the teacher took out the daikon root, which is like a big radish, put it in front of everyone. The teacher stood up there and did a beautiful watercolor of this fruit, and every child made a beautiful watercolor of the fruit. And so, of this radish isn't a fruit, it's a vegetable. And, well, it's a daikon, right? Is it daikon? Yeah. So, I mean, the skill development, you could see those portraits, and the skill of the kids, especially those in high ability classes, and the high school so superseded anything I saw in terms of skill at the university. When it became, they kept asking me, but how do we develop creativity? You know, and I thought, well, we're trying to get more skill in, and so that they can be creative. They wanted their students to be able to not be as, to be skillful, but then to be more creative. And I know when we were in Korea, South Korea, they're working towards that. And they said, we've abandoned all of these standardization in the arts because it didn't work. People develop skill. And I think we don't develop enough skill with our students in the United States personally. And students at a certain level, where they can be artists or arts, they want to have the tools to be able to do something that looks adult-like and not childlike. But then where do we go from there, and how do we do it? And I think that if the freewheeling kind of make and take projects, or here's a bunch of things, make some art out of it, is the wrong way to go. But it's also, when we think about it, the chart I drew, they're probably maybe at the 2nd level, but they don't go to that 3rd level. But in order to go to the 3rd level, we have to have our students have more skill. So that's one thing that I think that, and also I said the way teachers are treated by the community. Art people are in high regard. The arts are part of culture. The teachers are paid well, and they, I guess except for Taiwan, where they built too many schools and there weren't enough, because their child, level 1.7 or so, it's one of the lowest in the world, for a couple with children, they have less than 2 children to replace. So, they had too many schools, but otherwise, I think that support for the arts is not there the way it is in other countries. Do you want to say anything about that, Gil, the difference when we went to other countries?
Well, I think obviously the skill development in the Far East is so much above ours. The portraits that Enid showed of the software is very, 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 very well done, very recognizable and all that. And so you see skill development, but you don't see the creative extension of that in the Far East.
But we did in South Korea, they were beginning to do it, and then every child that came to this school for really highly able kids in the arts, they all had to do self-portraits. I didn't show that here, but a few of them really were able to go beyond the concept of self-portrait and really push the limits. Most of them just did something expected. So when they came up with the last thing, where the teachers were really shocked by some of the ways the students expressed themselves, but they had the skill and ability to do it.
Right.
And also their students do have to, in the countries that we're talking about now, the Far East, where I've worked a lot, students had to take art, and it's part of the culture. Where I think where we are always, my whole career, fighting for the arts. We all know that, and I think if we could really have a really support at the elementary level, then we would see the arts at a high level in our high schools for all the students. I mean, I think also the students should be doing all the arts. They should all do some theater, some even movement and dance, and learn a musical instrument, or do singing, or participate, because they are going to be the ones who are going to shape the future, not only as artists but appreciators. So, I mean, art is so ingrained in the culture, like in Japan, and where we've visited and taught and done workshops, and in Australia, which was interesting, when I was in Australia, people also, if you go to a dance performance, they not only had the young, beautiful dancers, they had people who were older, like my age, dancing. They still could move, and they also, my dancing, I used to dance when I was young. I did a lot of modern dancing, but now but if they were still able to, people with handicaps dancing, they included everybody in the performances.
And they also include children.
And children. Oh, and then the Native American, when they did the dancing, and we went on the Santo Domingo Pueblo. They don't dance for themselves, so we were working with them, and they were tourists, and we were able to watch the dancing, and they had also the people who were handicapped, who had like cerebral palsy, all kind dancing, and the little children dancing with the parents, and they learned it as part of the culture, and they also did artwork and made things with their parents. So it was, but I see like the different cultures we work with, like South Carolina, the Gullah people, are spoken another language, really very conservative kind of environment with grandparents. Came from the west coast of Africa, first generation. We were working with that, or second, that didn't come over as slaves, and how they also incorporated arts and cultures, and I think mainstream kind of where people are so interested in getting ahead and the academic grades, and those, you don't see the arts as, and so it's up to us, you, not me anyway, try to, but you have a really mission, I think, to do this. I mean, if you see yourself as missionaries of the arts, and you're bringing the arts to kids and people to express themselves and to make it part of the culture. And what kind of a culture do we have? A visual culture? Never in the history, maybe except during the Renaissance, was there so much art and visualization. And if you look on the computer, everybody, and when we used to speak, we'd stand and read our paper, and now I can do 77 slides that I make, and it's all visual. And where are the kids gonna get jobs? Parents, they'll never get a job if they study art. So we told our son, don't go into the arts. Because he would make money. He makes more money than I do now, every time. Well, he wound up being a professor, but there are so many jobs. He had a company, the second largest game company in New York City. Unfortunately, there's an unfortunateness that it went under right before when the stock market crashed and everything, this new recession, and they were going to sell the business and make millions of dollars, and the people who were going to buy it didn't have enough money, so the bottom fell out. And so he always talked to me about there weren't enough people in the United States who really knew what they were doing against skill. You go to these countries that we went to, like Taiwan, and there were all these skills that they had with computers. They all could do these phenomenal but it's really phenomenal things.
This addresses your question. I think
Yeah.
the fact that Eric had such a bad time getting American students
Right,
to come
that's
into
what
the
he meant,
country.
right.
He'd go to the Far East and get students who have highly developed representation skills.
And they work, and he said he couldn't find them, and they still can't, work with, they get, there were so many jobs, so any parent who said that you can't get jobs, if you have a visual art background and a strong technology too, and you would probably know that from your field particularly, there are jobs out there. There really are a lot of jobs still available. And it's a visual culture now. So if you take advantage of this, but all of you have to be up on your technology. You all have to learn different, I do iPhoto, but all the different things that you need to know. So that, and if you don't know them, your students are gonna know them, and let your students teach you. It's okay. You can't know everything. And the younger the students are, the more their brains are. Their brains are physically being changed and think differently. You think differently than I do. Because my grandson said, Grandma, you're supposed to be smart. What's wrong with you? And my daughter said, why can't you use your cell phone map? What is wrong with you? She said, it's so obvious. I said, I keep quiet, I don't know what to do. And she said, Mom, I don't believe it. But it's different. And you're going to use those skills because people are going to need them. And people can create all kinds of things now they couldn't before. And some of the skills are different that they need now than they needed before. So how are you going to do that and work with your students? And then students who don't have phenomenal drawing ability, who aren't going to be artists but want to create things. There's so many ways on the computer of accessing things and doing things. It's a whole different world. And it's going to be exciting. And if parents tell you, my kid, I don't want to, I want them to be what do people want them in business? And business is out now. Well, maybe it's medical things or doctors or who knows, or lawyers or whatever. But they can have jobs and have income. And I think it's one of the first times I think you can say that with some assurance. So, anyway, is that who? Oh, Michael, you asked. No, Abby asked it, right? Abby asked it, right?
Good. Loved it.
So, I don't know, would either of you want to say anything? I was born with blah ability. And with a captive audience, you can't leave. Like a few students last night left after I chastised them. That's okay, they'll remember it. And that's another thing, don't ever be afraid. Go in, you don't like what the students are doing, if it's not respectful, let them know immediately. Otherwise, you'll never be able to extinguish it. So you don't want people to like you as much as respect you as a teacher. Because later on, one woman came up to me last night, her name was Pilarski, when she was my student. And we had been talking about this student here who doesn't have arms, who teaches art. And I was so excited. This was such a coincidence. We were talking about coincidences. She came up and said to me, I teach. Do you know who I teach? And she said, first of all, she said to me, you were my teacher 20 years ago. You were a teacher too. She said, whenever I'm doing something, I think, what would Enid tell me to do? So it's a marvelous, the legacy of your students, and you're being able to really do something. It made me so happy. And then she said, I teach in a school with this. I said, I know about them, and it was such a coincidence. But she's such a supportive person, and I had remembered her after, she told me about when she was a student, because I have thousands of students, over 45 years of teaching. And here she was, and here she was working with this young man. It was, and I think because she's probably supportive also of him and what he's doing, and then I influence her. So, the things you're going to do now when you're students, and the people you influence. I was speaking in Wyoming to the teachers there, and there I am speaking at a museum, and then I went on to a talk to their students, like we're talking, a big group of students, and one came up and said, I went to your summer arts institute. Remember I showed you the kids that came in the summer, and study with Gil, she had been one of those students, and she said, if I hadn't gone to your summer camp and I hadn't been there on campus, and I never would have studied art, and now she's an art teacher out in Wyoming. So you never know your influence, and you have so much a legacy and so much you can offer to your students. It's, you know, there's nothing like it. You're really lucky to be having a career as art teachers. So you just feel good about it and don't have to let anybody take it away from you.
That's great.
Any more? Are there more questions? You sure? Do you have any practical
It looks like
questions?
you have many here.
This is just my notes from last night, I wrote a lot of stuff
No,
down
but
last
do
night.
you have any questions that you're concerned about? Going to be art teachers?
Well, what about, I kinda had a question about,
Sure.
when you were talking about how you traveled to all of these different places, and you mentioned when you started teaching that you started teaching at like the poverty line. When you ran into issues of like supplies, what did you do?
Creative, and you, first of all, you go out in the community, you find people will donate all kinds of things. If you go to a framing store, they throw out so much paper, and I collect, I'm still collect, you know, we in the art, we collectors, right? I mean, to make things, you need stuff, and so, parents, even in the poorest neighborhood, if you need certain kinds of cans or plastic bottles, or what, the parents will want to be helpful too. And if they don't have money, they can just bring things that you need that don't require a lot of money, or people can volunteer their time if they're able to. But also, I know that when I worked then with low-income students, students where they lived, their families were, that I had a new boxes of crayons, and they would go crazy, just crayons, because they never had a new box of crayons. Now, with the computers in most schools, you don't need sometimes as many supplies. But you can get paint stores, you go out in the community, people to donate things, they can take it off their income tax. And then we have in our community, but I don't know if it exists here, many communities have a recycling center. They also have like a place where they put things aside for school teachers in our community. Most people are starting that, so you can go there and get all kinds of supplies, and like we have a very well-known weaving kind of where the Roses have their, or that people do handmade weaving. It's known all over the world. In fact, I went to New York City, and a friend of mine had one of the weavings in her house, and it had torn, and I went back and asked them if she could have a replacement. Anyway, so it's there, and they always have the ends of bolts. And then the newspaper is still there. We still have newspapers, and they use a newsprint. When it gets to a certain point, they can't use all the paper that's on this roll, and they discard it. But if they give it to you as a teacher, then they can take it off their income tax, and you have all this newsprint. Very much for donating this kill that was worth, if I had to buy it, over $2,500, and thank you very much, and then they can allocate that, or if it's a donation from their income tax. So that if you don't even have a big budget, you just have to go out and scrounge. And then when you all graduate, get your emails and keep one another informed, because maybe Abby has an excess of this, but she needs that. And then Michael has more of this, but she needs something else. And if you keep in touch with the people you went to school with, and even go to your state meetings, where you can, I think it's important, I'm sure you keep up with your Ohio State. Well, it's a very good state organization. They give out all kinds of free things at the conference and load up, you know, and then also meet other teachers and get online and exchange. And if you see a teacher who's been around a long time and doing a presentation you really like, introduce yourself and say, I really want to learn more from what you're doing. And they all get a free day off each semester. In our state, you can go and see work. Take your professional day and visit teachers who've been teaching many years that you see in a conference. I mean, you want to see how they teach and spend a day with them. You'll learn so much more than from books and your art education, which I was one. Really, but you can only go there and learn because you're prepared to. So that's where we come in. But I think you really need to take advantage of that. Keep in touch with one another. Because if you're in an elementary school and you're the only art teacher, and you're isolated, and you don't have outside contacts, you feel like you're doing this drudgy job again. But if you say, well, I'm gonna, oh, so-and-so is, doing this, and we can all keep in touch with one another, like all the people in your class. Now with the email, remember we used to have people, say 4 of you are friends and you keep in touch. Then there's a state meeting. You all gonna do, when you're a little bit more mature and you're teaching a while, do a presentation. You're together. You all taught around a certain topic or whatever, and do it together in a state meeting and volunteer to do it. Get out of your classroom. Tell people what you're doing and what's working. And then your principal and your community will love you and support you. And then they want to cut art classes or cut down. And you've got those parents whose kids' artwork is shown and you have exhibits. You've got to get those parents in back of you. Kids who are really doing well with art. And then parents, and you cultivate those parents groups and you make sure your program stays in there and not cut or anything happens. You can make it happen. The first year is your hardest year. And I used to come home and go to sleep and then I wound up teaching and having a child and also doing my MFA. But, I had to work up to that. I finished my 5th year after I was teaching. The first year, everything is new. You have to make your first mistakes each time. And it's just a tough time. But don't give up because after that, everything is from your own experience. And I think that from my own experience, that's how it was. I don't know. You taught a lot. What do you think, Gil?
Oh, I was just thinking, I used to teach at San Diego, California. And one year, another friend of mine and I, both of us decided we weren't going to do anything in the summer except go to companies and see what we could get that might help us teaching. And we spent the whole summer doing that. And I filled a double garage with free materials that we got that summer. It was amazing. I taught from those materials the next 5 years.
You know what I used to do? I used to say to my students with that, $10. Go around to the garage sales this weekend and bring back as many art things as you can. We'll have a contest. So you can get the most with their $10. They brought back books, they brought back a painting, they talked people into, I'm in this contest. And they would come in with boxes full of things. And it's always like my big contest. Because I used to be a big garage garage sale person. Now I'm giving it away. You like it, you want it, I'll give it to you. Because I'm a purging. We're groaning, and my daughter said, Mom, when you're not here any longer, she said, what am I going to do with all this stuff? I mean, she's pretty honest, So we're starting to like it. My family can have it. But when I was starting out, and then there were teachers who retired, and a lot of my former students, they want something. I've got shelves and stuff I give to them. So that's also a way of getting things. But garage sales, you have a lot of garage sales. So that's fun to just go around. You can have a contest with a friend, like the 2 of you go around. Who's 4 of you really? Who's gonna get with you? That was what I wanted. Boy, people really went around. I don't know if you can do that in certain communities. You do it with your students. You're in high school and see what they can do. But that, then they have to have the $10, and if it's you have to think about it. But you can do that. It's all out there. You just gotta find it.
The thing I like about that too is that it teaches them about sustainability and recycling, all those things.
Right, exactly.
It teaches them other values at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting great materials, but
Right.
you're also reusing things that we're just gonna get trash.
Right, so that's great.
Yeah.
Of course.
And you mentioned the recycle centers in cities. There is one in Dayton, if you're in the Dayton area. There's I think it's in the spring. My husband always works there because he's the super recycler in our house. So he's had the schooling for it. He went to the Montgomery County Parks District did it. So, but all these things are brought in all year, and they're in this one facility, and then you can just call the recycle center. And I just want to tell you how Dayton works. You call the recycle center and they will tell you what day it is. And the cars are just lined up, and it's only for teachers. And you can take whatever you need. And there are just all kinds of things, strange things. I said, he came home and when he was taking the course, he had one of those white binders. It was like, and I said, now if we're talking about sustainability, those things cost about $15 or $20. He said, well, they came out, somebody brought them to the recycle center. And so those things that we don't think about then in your community, as you said. The other thing that's very important, and I don't know how, I run across these in other parts, major cities. I think Chicago has one. But Cincinnati has a facility called Crayons to Computers. And have you ever been there?
No, my cooperative teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Does stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I'm a little allergy there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Melissa Pearson
Mm-hmm.
gets all kinds of stuff.
Can you say a little more about it so that we'll know, and then I'll talk about how it works.
I don't know much about it, but like for the fall we got like leaf cutouts that prisoners actually cut out and packaged to get them something to do, and they sold them at a really low price, or donated them, or whatever, so that the teachers could use them. And we had kids, help decorate the school with the things that we got for nearly free.
Didn't she have some little like animals or some sort of little reward box, or am I mixing that up with something else?
She has
somebody
like
else.
art stars, which is like you get candy. I don't know if I guess she could get something down there.
I think they found some little animals.
Those little plastic animals.
Well, no, these were furry, and these were things for texture. And so if you got so many, I don't remember how it worked anymore. But the way Crayons to Computers work, if you are are teaching in a school district that's at risk, you can go there anytime, take a grocery cart, and go around and get what you need, and take it back and use it. And they have crayons to computers, but they're not in a school district that has at-risk children. You can still go there if you're like from Mason, but what they want is 4 hours of your time once a month to stock shelves and do that kind of thing. So it's virtually open to everyone, but it's absolutely free with no commitment. I think sometimes people give that commitment anyway, for the greater good. So those kinds of facilities are around too, and if you're networking, you know about them because somebody said, "Oh, you can get that done," and I've often, as I've been, and I'm running on here now, and we're supposed to be talking.
No, that's okay.
I hear teachers in a district say, "Oh, the art teachers never get together anymore. We aren't given time for meetings." And well, as cheery as I can, I say, a pizza night once a month works really well. And then you can just determine your own fate and just kind of, blow it off and go on that way. But plant the thought, but you're not powerless. You have spent a lot of time and energy and your life commitment and your heart to become this art teacher. And you've heard me say this. When I look at you, I see 30,000 children behind you, because if you teach 30 years, and if you are, have when I taught elementary, I saw 1,000 kids a week. That's 30,000 children that you have an opportunity. to have an impact on. And so when I look at each of you and I see them behind you, you know, I have a commitment. I'm just not apologetic about anything, and thank you so much for saying that. Because, it doesn't help me. It provides a means for me to do what I need to do. And so, you are their advocate. Children have no voice. And so you have to do this. And I know from working with all of you that you're gonna be doing it. So, you know, in a sense, I'm preaching to the choir, but, you know, you're extraordinary, all of you.
Cream in the crop, even though I'm not supposed to say it. No, but in every situation, to be honest, there are people who have more skills and more interest, more ability than others, that's right. And everybody's needs has to be accommodated. And there may be some of your students who are studying with you who don't care, or maybe I won't even be an art teacher. And there are some of you who are really passionate about it. And that makes people who are really passionate, committed. Find those people and don't glom on with the people who are negative, because that brings you down. And there are so many wonderful people I know in my community. I belong to the old art teacher society, the Oaks, and all of those people, some of my own age, retired now. I was their teacher, and they were one of them had a doctorate with me, and you know the others all studied with me, and they were as teachers, and but we're all together now, and you know what I mean. We stopped meeting, but we met for years after we retired, and you know, and exchanged stories, and I have gone in and to schools where I am still to help the design, I can't stand it, I'm doing paper mache, I can't do it alone. You know, I'm doing this, I need an extra hand. I haven't done it in a few years. They probably think that I'm on my way out, but I have to renew that I go out and, you know, and still love being in the classroom with the kids and when they're making things. We were just talking about that.